Okay, so yes, welcome here, everybody. This is very exciting. Um, uh, we are going to begin with a prayer, and then I will introduce myself and we'll have a few other little bits of housekeeping and get into our business. So before any of that business, let's just take a minute and remember that we are here as part of the church. We are the church together, and this is a really great privilege to meet together and talk about these things as the people of God. So let's pray. This is a prayer written by Wendy Jansen. She's the Eco Minister in Mennonite Church, Eastern Canada. Source of all life, breathe your spirit into our time of learning together, that it might be a gift of exactly what we need today. May we be open to receive your wisdom and gracious presence. May we enter into this time of learning open-heartedly, and may we open our lives to give and receive freely. Amen. So I am Sandy Collette. I'm the Climate Action Coordinator for Mennonite Church Canada. I've been at this work for just over 6 months. Been a great, exciting time of figuring out what to do and getting to do lots of great things and getting to meet a lot of people. And I feel like I'm adding another 36 people today. Well, I guess 30, a little less than that, because I know some of you already, and I know myself. So it's great. One part of my, let's see here. Yeah, so one part of my job as Climate Action Coordinator is to build the church's understanding, or help build the church's understanding of how we as God's people can respond to the climate crisis. This workshop and the emissions reduction grant are one way of responding, and so welcome here. A word about the climate situation that we are in. The climate crisis is huge. Climate change is a threat multiplier. That might be a term you've heard before, meaning that the issues with climate are magnifying all the other problems that humanity is facing right now. And so sometimes when we allow ourselves to think about the magnitude of this crisis, we are, by allowing ourselves to think about that, we make ourselves vulnerable to feelings of overwhelm and fear and anxiety and all that comes with that. So I just want to say those feelings are real, and it's really important to pay attention to them. These feelings are also a sign to us that something is wrong. And when something is wrong, it's time to take action. And so here we are. Let's name that this is at this time of learning and community building together with people across Canada. This is one way that we are responding with action to the crisis. And let us also name that we respond not because of what we will accomplish, but because of who God is calling us to be. And for today, let us name that God calls us to be the hands and feet of Christ, expressing love for the world in what we say and in what we do. These are the things we're naming as we gather together. And I am so glad that you are all here today for this workshop. I just want to mention a few housekeeping things before we get into the presentation from Stephen. You can keep yourselves on mute until the question and answer time. If you have a question while Stephen is presenting, you can wave. I'll try to watch. You can do the little reaction thing, or you can type something in the chat if you have a question of clarification about something that Stephen has mentioned. Questions about your property or your church, your building, write those down and hang on to them, and there'll be a nice long question and answer time at the end. So we'll try to get to all of those as well. So as we go, if things come up, make a note of it for the end. And I think that's it for housekeeping. Is there anything else I should mention, Stephen?
No, I think it's all good.
That's all good. All right. Stephen Collette is the Building Audit Manager for Faith and the Common Good. Stephen created the Green Audit after seeing an opportunity to improve the connections between faith, buildings, and the existing passion of people who want to do the right thing within their faith community. The Green Audit has been delivered across Canada to rave reviews. Stephen is a building scientist a sustainable building consultant, and a heritage professional specializing in faith community buildings. Stephen lives in Lakefield, Ontario. Let's give Stephen our attention, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Sandy. Thank you, everyone. I'm like super blown away with how many people are here. So I want to just seriously acknowledge Mennonite Church Canada. I've given these kind of talks like the United Church of Canada, the Anglican Church of Canada, you know, and we've done national ones and like provincial ones and regional ones, and we get like 10, we're rocking it. You guys have like at 34 participants, you have more than 10-15% of the number of congregations present. But that's a remarkable number, and I say that not lightly. The seriousness and the potential that people are taking this, the climate crisis and the energy efficiency piece and the carbon reduction, I think really needs to be acknowledged by the fact that you are here today. So as Sandy said, I work with Faith in the Common Good. Has anyone heard of Faith in the Common Good? That's okay. We are a multi-faith national nonprofit. And so we work with all faith communities, all denominations, synagogues, mosques, temples, Anglicans, Mennonites. We'll even work with Catholics. We'll work with everybody. My mom's Catholic. I'm just goofing. And so we were actually started by the former moderator of the United Church of Canada, Bill Phipps, who was out of Calgary. Now we got some Calgary people here down Knox, downtown. And that was actually part of the Romanov conversations on healthcare. And as the conversations went across the country, they wanted faith communities at the table, because Romanov understood that they represented the communities as a whole. And so that was part of the organization that Bill Phipps did. And out of that came Faith in the Common Good. And so social justice and environmental justice have always been the pillars of our organization. And so I am the building nerd. That is my job. I love buildings. I love crawling around inside churches. Any chance to get in the attic of your building, and I will, because they tell a story. Our faith communities represent who we are, but also who we want to be. They represent our values, they represent our beliefs, they represent our heritage and our history. And they're really important. The other thing is they're really unique in that they're the only type of building that is used completely differently by each user. What I mean is, if I said, how does a school operate? You know, it's Monday to Friday, 8 to 3. We know how stores are run, how factories operate, how offices, how homes. But faith communities are the only type of building that its operation is dependent on you. Right? Do we have garden clubs? Do we have kids programs? Do we have seniors programs? Do we have food banks? Do we have meal plans? Do we have choir and choral and it's about you. And so when we think about how we use our buildings, we have a loving, caring group of volunteers who may not know enough about their building, who may not be building professionals, but they care and wear their hearts on their sleeves when they come into that building to express their worship. And so that's what we're talking about. How can we help you continue to express your worship in a way that is meaningful to each of you? All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to nerd on the energy stuff, because that's how I worship. And so we're going to talk about some energy opportunities, and I'm going to talk about some tools and resources. And so that's what the presentation is going to be, and sort of on a big scale, just to help you. And then we'll take questions and answers about your building after that. So with that, I'm going to start into the presentation. And here we go. All right. And good. So what I really want to start with is this tool. So this is called the Pyramid of Conservation, or Pyramid of Energy Efficiency. And this actually came from the Minnesota Power. They actually created it, and it's such a powerful tool that we actually use it all across in all sorts of buildings. Now, this is set up for residential. but we can still have this conversation. When we think about what we want to do to lower our energy, lower our carbon footprint, reduce operational costs, have more money for mission, all these are reasons to look at this stuff. We need to start at the foundation, and that's always where we need to start. Okay. And so if you're new to this or just don't know where to start, we always start at the bottom and we work our way up. And that makes the biggest payback, the simplest process, and the best process as far as achieving goals. So down at the bottom, understanding. Are you tracking your energy? Are you keeping watch on how your energy is being used? Do we have programmable thermostats? Have we ever had a walk around? Have we ever just done an inventory of how old are our appliances and our, heating equipment and furnace, stuff like that is? Always start with the real basic stuff. Then we're moving into low cost, no cost, programmable thermostats, hot water settings, plug loads, making sure that minister actually turns off all the equipment in the office before they leave, right? I know a lot of ministers, and that's one of the things they're oftentimes terrible at. So, does the office equipment, do the lights get turned off? Like these kind of things that sometimes are left to volunteers like ourselves, walking around the building, making sure. But we want to just be thinking about these as everyone has that opportunity to worship that way when they understand what it means. Okay. Then we're going to jump into lighting. So lighting's your typical low cost, quick return on investment. The payback time in years is typically very short for switching to LED lights. We want to think about the most used lights. So contrary to belief, the sanctuary lights are the least take the longest payback because they're on typically the least amount of time in comparison to, say, an office or a kitchen hall that maybe has rental spaces, again, depending on the usage, of course, and the size of the church, rural and urban. But LEDs are a really quick payback. For example, exit lights. So if you have an incandescent exit light bulb and replacing it with an LED, the payback is about 16 weeks before you've actually paid for that in energy savings. That's kind of the stuff we're talking about. With the fluorescent tubes, which is a real common, in our halls or kitchens or gymnasiums. The tubes, you can now replace the tubes, plug and play. You can pull the old fluorescent out, you can put in a new LED. Bob's your uncle, away you go. You've improved the brightness, the amount of lumens that comes off, and they all have the same color. Also thinking about things like your outdoor lights, your parking lot lights. Your parking lot lights, from a light fixture perspective, will be your largest electrical consumer from a lighting perspective. If you have parking lot lights, you could be looking at a 450 watt bulb for a parking lot light, and you can now switch that out to a 45 watt bulb for a parking lot light, which is remarkable. So keep that in mind. Other outdoor lights, you also want to think about your controls. You want to think about dimmers, timers, daylight sensors, and motion sensors. So having timers and motion and daylight sensors on your outdoor lights, really, really helpful. So not running when you don't need them. You want to think about dimmers, such as in the sanctuary, when you change the sanctuary bulbs, which is oftentimes a bigger job because it may involve, ladders and scaffolding or whatever, commercial skyjacks to get up there sometimes. We want to just make sure we're doing that properly. We want to think about the controls, because the old dimmers don't actually save you any electricity. They just make heat. And that's why some of them on some of your light switches will have the aluminum fins, and that's so the wall doesn't catch fire. That's exactly what it's for. So switching to a solid state will actually save you energy. And then finally, motion sensors. So you can put motion sensors in places like bathrooms. So it's not the same 4 people walking around the building after every service, after every event, making sure all the lights are off. You can have the motion sensors turn off automatically. Okay. Now I'll tell you a funny story, true story. Congregation in Saskatchewan I was working with, and they had, she said, "Oh, we have motion sensors in the women's bathroom." There was a lovely old Scotsman that put it in from our congregation. She said he set the timer, because you can set the timers on these. He set the timer to 3 minutes before the lights went out, because he felt that was enough time for the women in the bathroom. Well, it didn't take too long for all the women in the congregation to have a firm conversation with him and sort that detail out, and the timer was changed. So we can set the timer to like 15 minutes and nobody gets left in the dark. Like that man was probably a pretty quiet car ride home after service, I suspect. So we can think about those things with timers, even in hallways and stairwells, code approved, can also help save volunteer energy. So for those of you in the bigger buildings, you know, that volunteer energy is a piece to keep in mind, because we respect and appreciate the volunteer time taking and doing simple tasks like this, you know, just, you know, people not taking care of the building, you know, that can be disheartening. And so automating some things can be really well. In the smaller urban rural churches, and I'm a rural person, I live in a small village. Yeah, those things aren't as important for sure. Ceiling fans, sanctuary. You want to have that sanctuary, the ceiling fans blowing down. Hot air rises. And so when we have big volumes, we have greater temperature stratification. And so by driving that energy down, we can actually reduce the number of cycle times on the thermostats. And that's a huge piece, really huge piece. Okay, so keep that in mind. So commercial ceiling fans that are slower, more efficient, and reversible, blowing down in summer, so I can feel that breeze. I do not want to feel the breeze in the winter, pardon me. So counterintuitively, you actually blow upwards, hit the ceiling, and stir the air like a pot of tea. So ceiling fans can save you a lot of money. Okay. Next, we move into air sealing, and this is a huge one for our faith community buildings. Oftentimes, we will have an attic hatch, and oftentimes it'll be located under the steeple, which is super common for many congregations. Okay, now I want you to think about your sanctuary as a big volume, a big balloon blowing up all this hot air, all the hot air rising. And then what we do is we bolt a steeple to the front of it to help suck those heating dollars out as fast as humanly possible, because your attic hatch is leaking a lot. Cubic meters of air per minute in some cases. Okay, so what you do is after service with a collection plate, you stand underneath the attic hatch and you keep throwing 20s up to it until it jams shut, because it's costing you a fortune. Okay, so really think about air sealing, and especially the top, which is your attic hatches, because they are physically outside doors. Okay, caulking around windows, doors, weather stripping, all that stuff's really great. Then we move into appliances. Then we're thinking about fridges, freezers, right? If you are rocking a green avocado or harvest gold fridge, it is financially killing you. Yes, it won't die. Yes, it'll still be ticking. It'll keep the ice cream warm after the apocalypse. But financially, it is a huge economic burden. Okay, every 5 years, a brand new Energy Star is using about half of something that's 5 or 10 years older. Okay, so if it's 20, 30, 40 plus, it's a huge economic burden. Okay, and so I do recommend you change out your fridges and freezers to Energy Star. Dishwashers, you know, commercial or residential, you know, we can get Energy Star models for those. Energy Star. And why do we want Energy Star? Reminder, Energy Star is the top 10% most efficient within that category. And so when you're going to spend the church's money, which is not yours, right? And as volunteers, always take that really carefully, right? And respectfully. We want to get the best bang for our buck for the longest time. And that's where you're going to get that with Energy Star. Okay. Stoves, you know, getting off the gas and going to electric, certainly from a decarbonizing perspective, is excellent. The cost that we have some Alberta people, the cost, that's a tough sell in Alberta because gas is so incredibly cheap. And as far as decarbonizing in Alberta, you're not You're not making that because your electricity is fossil fuel generated as well. So it's really difficult in some regions to think about these sort of things. So I am sensitive to the fact that we have people from all over Canada, and your energy sources are quite mixed. Yeah, then we're thinking about hot water tanks. Again, how old is your hot water tank? 15 to 20 years of life expectancy. So how old is it? Oh, we don't know. Well, someone should have a look and someone should write it down, right? And then we're looking at insulation. Is there any insulation up in the attic? Well, I don't know. The last time Bob went up there was 1984, right? Like, we don't go up there. So we want to send someone up young and flexible and disposable into the attic to have a look and just see what's going on. Okay, is there any insulation there? Get some photos. Okay, let us understand what's going on. And our walls, a lot of difficult, depending on where we are. Now, Mennonite churches are oftentimes, but not always, more wood framed because of our rural connections. And so there can be opportunities for insulation. If there's none, depending on where we are, a masonry, massive stone faith buildings, they're harder to insulate the walls. That's really not something we want to take. We have to take that really, really carefully because it can make things worse. But our attic, definitely, we can always use a good tube. Okay. Then we're kind of looking, windows. The payback on windows, people always like, oh, I want to change my windows. They're leaky. They're a heat loss. They are, but it's not as much as you think. We actually lose more energy around the window system. So from air leakage, from caulking failure, because no one ever gets up, to see those stained glass windows up close because they're tall, really hard to reach. Right. And so caulking is usually a bigger concern, especially with wood frame stained glass, because once the caulking fails, the water gets behind the wood mullions and causes rot. And so then the stained glass, can become unstable, structurally unsound. So caulking is really, really important, way more important than replacing the window as far as energy and preservation and durability. Payback on changing a window out to a single glaze to a double glaze in years, just in energy efficiency, is somewhere between 75 and 230 years, depending on what building scientist you're drinking with. And so the payback's not there. You can now, and to be clear, that's different than thermal discomfort, which is very much nerd level 9, but there is a difference. Okay, there is a difference. And so you're better off replacing the weather stripping on your operable windows. And if we're rocking the old stained glass with metal on metal, maybe some foam weather stripping, gentle, so that we're not causing any stress on the stained glass to help make those a little more airtight. But that's usually your better payback, typically. Doors, we want to talk about weather stripping around your doors. If you've got the Caterpillar style weather stripping on the door proper, or vinyl, there's set screws. You can undo it, pull that right out, and wag it at your local home hardware, and get them to order you a new roll. Okay. If you've got frame mounted, we can replace the frame mount, good frame mounted weather stripping that's made out of vinyl and flexible. We'll set you back $100. Okay. Then we're kind of at the point where we're looking at the big bucks. Okay. Now we're looking at mechanical systems. So your heating, your cooling, if you have cooling, are we using oil? Are we using gas? Are we using electricity? Do we have rads? Do we have furnaces? Do we have heat pumps? Lots of different questions, and we just want to make sure that we're making the best decisions. And those are the expensive ones. Okay. And typically, keep this in mind, 85% of all heating systems are replaced after the old one broke. 85. Okay. So does that mean you were probably getting the best deal possible when you were when you were behind the 8 ball? Of course not. You're not. And again, that hurts when we're dealing with the church's money. All right. We want to make better decisions and be proactive instead of reactive. Okay. And so having proper yearly maintenance I want you to think about it as a big flamey thing underneath all your beautiful stuff. And that's how you should treat it. And you should inspect it yearly. Okay. And have that sense of that. Okay. And ask your heating contractor, get him or her to answer the 2 questions. What's your best guess life expectancy on your heating system? What's your best guess operational efficiency if you had to guess? Right? Because if you're rocking a furnace from the 80s, well, out of the box, sparkly new, it was about 85% efficient. Right? Now, I don't know about any of you, but I am not as efficient as I was in the 80s. Okay. And neither is your furnace. Okay. So just keeping that in mind, that the efficiency does decrease with time. Okay. Really important. And finally, when we get to the tippy top, if you've done everything else, then you can have a conversation about solar from an energy efficiency payback. Okay. Energy efficiency payback. Okay. Now, if you want to do it because of mission, because of environmental justice, social justice, marketing to the young people, because they understand that symbol. Maybe you got rebates in your province and you want to take a whole, those are all great reasons. That's not energy efficiency. Okay. From an energy efficiency perspective, if you were rocking the green avocado fridge in the basement, it's going to take 3 extra panels to power that beast. That's not economic sense, right? You want to get the Energy Star fridge, so you only need 1 panel on the roof for it. Okay. And that makes more economic sense. Okay. So keep that in mind. All right. Like I said, cool slide. So I am with Faith in the Common Good. We have a website and I'll put it in the chat, but it's faithinthecommongood.org. We have some free tools that we are delighted to share with Mennonite Church Canada. And when you go there, and I'll share, like I said, I'll share the link, we have a do-it-yourself energy audit guidebook. And for those of you in Manitoba, this actually came originally from Manitoba Hydro. And they graciously shared it with us openly and allowed us to change and brand and do everything with it. So hats off to Manitoba Hydro. It's a pretty good book. First 2/3 help explain what heat pumps are and programmable thermostats and LEDs so that you can have conversations around the table. Okay, and that's really great. Okay. And so, and then the back one is a walkabout. It's basically an inventory list. And so it's really useful and it's free. It's a PDF. You download it. And away you go. You can share it with all your property team. So I really like that one a lot. The Energy Star Action Workbook, that comes from the US. We're the only Canadian organization partnering with the US EPA. And that's a great book. And here, actually, we have some, this is actually United Church in Dundas, Nova Scotia. And these are actually lovely Mennonites actually putting in the windows and in that building. So that's a great connection there. I like that, the workbook for congregations, another great tool. And again, it's free. Also, there's a treasure map for worship facilities. So it's a real sort of 3-pager. 7-pager, pardon me, and it's like super quick. So if you want just like, I need something to start and I don't know what I'm doing and I'm not an expert, the treasure map for worship facilities, that's really great. Now on the right, some of you have had an energy audit in your own home over the years, and you got this workbook that came with that when you did it called Keeping the Heat In. Okay, and some of you may have an old print copy, some of you may have PDF copy. It's really, really great. Okay, this is for homes, but heat is heat and it's all the same. So it's really, really useful. Okay. And so you can keep that in mind. If you've had a copy of that, it's worth dusting it off, or it is free online at Natural Resources Canada as well. So building audits. So what are building audits and why should we be thinking about them? Well, there's a spectrum of choice, and I'm definitely not here to tell you need to do one or the other. Okay. But I'm here to offer some insights. And yes, we do some audits, but I'm not pushing them by any stretch. So when we look at one end of the spectrum, that's the free DIY I just talked about. That's great, right? Doesn't cost anything. Totally, you should do it. I think it's a great resource. I like it best, especially to have the conversations around the board table about what heat pumps are or why we should do this for the other people who don't know. So I love that book for it. So that's zero cost. We, Faith in the Common Good, offer a virtual green audit. And so that's me here on Zoom, you there in your congregation space, walking around showing me stuff. You show me things you want to see, you show me things I want to see. We record the video. Okay, you get a copy of the recording, and out of that, you also get a one-page summary of recommendations and bullet points of things that might make sense for your building. And I can't see everything, it's not going to be perfect, but it's low cost and it's super accessible to everybody. And the cost is $100 an hour, and it typically takes 1 or 2 hours to go through a building. Okay, so that's a virtual green audit. Okay, and that's what that is, and that can be really helpful. So you've got me, no matter where you are in the country, sort of walking you through stuff. We do offer a green audit, which is us in person, and that's sort of me or colleagues on site, and that could take half a day to 3/4 of a day. And we look at energy because it's really important, but we also look at air quality and food and water and waste and maintenance and marketing and rental and heritage and bums in seats, and we make everything needs to be sustainable, right? Well, I can make the most energy efficient building in Mennonite Church Canada, but if no one's in it, that's stupid, right? That's not successful, right? That's not how we should do it. So we do need to look at everything. And so that's a service we do offer. It's a fee for service, and it's under $2,000. It's a function of square footage and where you're located. I bet you get a report that's like 30 or 40 pages. Okay. Now an energy audit is the next one. So an energy audit is usually engineers or energy auditors following what's called an ASHRAE level 2 audit, energy audit. And there's prescriptions and there's outputs as far as software they use and report styles. And this is typically required if your province or the feds have a grant program running. And so if there was a grant and you could get that money, you would jump that hoop and get an energy audit. Now, an energy audit, as I said, typically comes with grant programs. And so they can be reduced because of that, because they get money from the grant provider as well. But market value for an average church, you're looking at $5,000. So if you're just like, I just want one and I'm paying for it and this is market value, could be about $5,000. It depends, square footage and location, all these sorts of pieces, of course, but ballparking. Finally, engineering audits. Engineering audits is something you would use if you're doing a capital campaign, major reno, additions, all sort of big projects, and you would have design team involved, and their engineering team would basically work out your payback on every single light bulb down to that kind of accuracy. And so they would really get into the weeds. And you'd be looking typically, again, just real generals here, $10,000. So you can't take any of those numbers to the bank, but this is just a spectrum and a ballparking so that you have sort of the sense of what you might need. And it could be anywhere on the spectrum, and each of you are going to be different. Okay. So just so you know that they exist. Now, for you folks, and part of the reason you're here is there is some funding, which is awesome. And I will give a shout out to Mennonite Church Canada. You are the only the second national church in Canada offering grants. That's it. Only the second. The United Church of Canada does have grants. They're a bigger church. Fair is fair. They have a bit more money on the table. And I'm actually running that grant program. But Anglicans don't have anything, Catholics don't have anything, Presbyterians, nobody. The Anglicans came out with a national program once, and they were offering, I think it was $1,000 to be split between 3 churches. I kid you not. It was so embarrassing. The website went down within a day. And so this is really difficult. So I really, again, want to acknowledge Mennonite Church Canada for actually doing this, because it's rare. Our understanding from a big level, Church of England and the Anglican Church of Australia are the only other ones that we know of right now at national levels that have big programs. And so really, again, just acknowledging the fact that you folks are doing this, I think it's amazing. So the website, Sandy is a contact person. You can request a grant to cover up to 50% of the cost of a proposed project, up to a maximum grant amount of $6,000. You can use other funds. So if your province has grants or your energy providers have grants, you can use those towards that. You should consider an audit as the first step, and there's an application deadline by September 23rd. And Sandy, did you want to chime in on this? Obviously, it's not mine. This is all Sandy's doing. She's amazing at this.
I'll just speak up. I don't know how to make it so you can see me, but I don't think you need to see me right now. Just that I'd be really happy to answer any questions you have about the emissions reduction grant. And the credit goes to the Sustainability Leadership Group, not to me. I'm just putting together what was handed to me very helpfully when I started this work. But yeah, hang on to your questions about that grant because I would love to answer them.
Awesome. Thanks, Sandy. All right. So funding, let's talk money because that's the bottom line. We're all keen about the money. You want to check with your energy providers. Okay. So your energy providers may offer grants and rebates to you. Typically the gas companies will help you with electrical stuff and your electrical companies will help you with gas stuff. That's sort of how it works. But you can shake the bushes. And so some of you have provincially delivered energy and some of you have privately delivered energy. So Alberta, your energy provider grants come from the province, even though they're private. Manitoba Hydro, Sask Power, we got BC, Ontario goes Ontario Hydro grants. That's your that's your provincial grants. So sometimes there's an overlap, and that's how your province delivers, is through your energy providers, and sometimes not. So for people in Ontario, your gas company, Enbridge Union, may have grants for you, which are not part of the province. Okay. Check with your municipality. I have seen a couple, especially rural congregations, receive some municipal funds because of the social services they were offering, whether that's food banks or stuff like that. So if you're active in your community, like outside of the church, feel free to just give your municipality a call and just say, hey, is there anything for us? Because they have their own environmental requirements to meet for their own funding. And so you may be able to leverage that. Don't get your hopes up, but it's an easy phone call for most of us. Member of provincial parliament. So again, check your province. And if you don't know where to start, call your MPP, right? That's their job. Okay, that's their job. Federally, as far as I know, there's nothing on the table right now. But you can always call your member of parliament as well. And if they give you the runaround and any of those people give you the runaround, I don't know, we're a church, I'd threaten them with fire and brimstone or something to get them on board. Tell them they need to give us some money. Okay. So we just want to, how can we leverage, especially with this amazing opportunity here from Mennonite Church Canada, how can we leverage that? Okay. And that's how you would go about that. And with that, that's it for me, my friends, as far as the song and dance. So, yeah.
We missed the dance, Stephen.
I guess it was when the camera was off. Sorry.
All right. Thank you so much for I'm going to record this on speaker view now for a minute. Thank you so much for walking us through all that stuff. And I just threw in the links as you were talking, the link to the Pyramid of Energy Conservation. If you weren't looking at the chat while Stephen was talking, good for you. That means you have good focus, but peek at it now. I also linked to Faith in the Common Good, where those DIY audit, the walkthrough is available, and some of the other resources he was showing us are on that website. Keeping the heat in, I found that there's a link. So if you don't need to dust off an old copy, you can just download a fresh one. You can do that. The link is in the chat. Oh yeah, and Stephen's added a couple of links there too. So at this point, we just want to give you a chance to ask Stephen questions. And I think all questions are fair game because you're all dealing with church buildings and they have a lot of commonalities. So don't feel self-conscious if you think this only applies to me. If it only applies to you and it's taking a long time, we'll cut you off and say, here, let's finish that one later. But please feel free to ask your questions or reflections on next steps. Yeah, Stephen, do you want to give any shape to the kinds of questions you're looking for, or just open it?
Nope, everybody's gonna be different, so, with this potential, with this grant from, sort of Mennonite Church Canada, it does give an opportunity to think about things, so, yeah, no, the floor is open, raise your hand, use a little, reaction, whatever you want, and, try to answer some questions. All right, Nelson, I see your hand. You're on mute. There we go.
Yeah. Okay. Well, no. Thank you very much, Stephen. I just want to say maybe a couple of things. I don't know Stephen at all. I never met him before until Sandy and I kind of came across him, and I think this is one of he really gave you a lot of value for your money, especially since we didn't have to pay for this. But great. It was really a great presentation and very helpful. And I'm positive that even just the energy, the money and the energy you're saving, which has been the focus of his presentation, is of worth, right? For sure. Yeah. Do it for that. Yeah. But in addition to that, I'd just like to point out, it can reduce your greenhouse gas emissions as well. And you can even, he mentioned Alberta, but Saskatchewan's the same way with a relatively, they call it a dirty grid, fossil fuels in the grid. Those values are coming down as both provinces are trying to decarbonize their grid. And the other thing, you can do a calculation to try to see, okay, what are the greenhouse gas emissions coming off of that? And there's a carbon tax that we're all paying on our fuels too. So keep that in mind. You can do a calculation and convert, or at least look at the emissions and the dollar value that you're paying, right? So those are other things to keep in mind. But thanks again, Stephen. That was great.
Thanks, Nelson. I appreciate that. And you're absolutely right, Nelson. We can think both. And so I use a variety of different sort of ways at it, because I understand that not everyone's interested in climate change. And I get that. And I don't, that's fine, right? And so we need to be able to make sure that we're using language with the rest of our congregation to make them feel comfortable. And if I can say, we're saving the climate and getting rid of greenhouse gas because oil extraction is a terrible thing, that's hard to say in Alberta, right? Because livelihoods depend on it, and I absolutely respect those livelihoods. And so we don't use that language. I say, look, let's save some operational money so we have more money for mission. And I would never say that to anyone anytime, by the way. I just want to be clear. That's not helpful. So we do need to think about the language. But yes, we are saving, reducing greenhouse gas. We can also look at the fact that the oil and gas industry is incredibly important because it's a finite resource. That's just a fact. And we will need the oil industry to help us transition by coming up with really important ways for things like industry where it's really difficult to go electric, right? And we will need them to be more inventive and more creative. And that will come, not from the top. It's going to come from the people in Alberta. That's the brains of our energy. That's our energy brain trust as Albertans. Hands down, I 100% feel that way. So with that transition, it's a finite resource. The prices will go up. It's simply a fact. It's a finite resource. And because of that, switching off, although short term, to Nelson's point, may not make sense, long term it will. Thanks, Nelson. Brad, I see you, my friend.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, thanks a lot for the presentation. I had a similar question to Nelson. I guess look at your pyramid. As I understand it, that was sort of ranked in order of bang for the buck for and payback in terms of energy costs. And I understand that if you're looking at greenhouse gas emissions, it's going to depend on where you're getting your energy from. If everything is from greenhouse or from carbon emitting sources, then it's the same pyramid. But let's say, so we're in BC where we get a lot of hydro electric and we're using gas. How might you reshuffle your pyramid if you're looking at greenhouse gas emissions versus kind of the payback?
Yeah, so in British Columbia, your heating systems aren't a big deal because you don't need them as much, right? You're in typically temperate climates. If you're in lower mainland, for sure. So you're really going to just really look at, well, possibly air conditioning now, right? And so where we go from temperate climates, you might be like, we didn't need air conditioning before, but now we seriously need air conditioning for operation. So we do need to think about planning ahead. But I think the pyramid's still valuable. You're just going to zip through it, right? The quick paybacks and oftentimes the buy-in, the lights, right? What happens is when we change the lights, it's not painful, it's an easy process. But when people come in and they're like, oh, it's bright in here, oh, I can read the hymn book, oh, I can have that. The people who aren't like on this Zoom, there's a couple in your congregation you're going to have to, convince. If they experience better performance with energy savings, they're like, I want more. Right. And so sometimes we need to think about that buy-in. You can go change the mechanicals and save a heap of money and nobody knows the difference if you don't tell them. Right. So we do want to always keep in mind people. But how would I change it? No, I wouldn't necessarily change it. I would definitely go through it. I would do that inventory. How old is the hot water tank? Is the hot water tank insulated? Are the pipes insulated? I worked with one church and they had jalousie windows. The in BC they had the windows that just flap like this, because they live in super temperate climate, right? And so they're like, we think we should change this. I'm like, yeah, I think you should. So it could be different, of course, but wood building, brick building. Think about air sealing. The better we can contain the vessel. The better we can contain the vessel with air sealing, the easier it is to control. And now that's really important for wildfire smoke as well. So keeping that in mind too. So, yeah. No exact answers, Brad, sorry. But if you have more specific, you want to poke me, Brad, I'm absolutely happy to dive in there.
Elizabeth is waving her hand there.
All right. Elizabeth, my friend, you go ahead.
I just wanted to ask, what about the problem of landfill? If we decide to get all LED lights and we come out with a lot of bulbs that have to go to the landfill.
Yeah, great question. And that's a great question, Elizabeth. Yeah.
So how do we balance that?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be better to replace the bulbs as they need to be replaced with the LED instead of having a whole cartload of bulbs to put in the landfill?
No, that's a great question, Elizabeth. And when we look at life cycle, we really have to look at from extraction to end of use. When we're looking at fridges and freezers, which are a bigger deal, fridges and freezers, surprisingly, if you were rocking a 20-plus-year-old fridge, the energy savings, the carbon savings does outweigh that extraction, that the embodied energy is that term, for all the energy it took to make the fridge and get it to your church. Replacing a 20-plus-year-old fridge, the embodied energy versus the operational energy, the savings is still on the table. You're still saving the planet doing that. It's hard. It's a hard feel, but the numbers do support that. With the lights, we're really hoping that more glass and stuff is separated. Glass and metal from the incandescence. The fluorescence, they are properly disposed, and that does happen with fluorescence when you take them to hazardous waste, because they have to remove the mercury in pieces. So, but those are hard questions, Elizabeth, and typically speaking, the bigger the payback is with that piece. But we want to do our homework. Where's the bulb going? Where's the fridge going? I don't want to truck it to the landfill. I want to make sure someone's decommissioning it properly.
Thank you for that question, Elizabeth. I had I'll get to you, Vern, in a minute. There was a question in the chat from Victor Clausen. Victor, did you want to restate that question for everyone?
Well, I'm just trying to understand the process with a grant. With a lot of grants, you're supposed to have go through the application process and have it approved and everything before you can actually start acting. And that's that. In our case, we're looking at replacing a furnace with a heat pump.
Yeah.
And it's a rooftop heat pump, and the supply chain is such that rooftop heat pumps are 30 to 35 weeks out. So already we're talking next into the next heating season. For us to wait until, I don't remember when the grant process gets answered, we would miss the next heating season. We would be into spring or summer.
Yeah, so that's a good question about the timeline. The applications are due at the end of September. Paying out of these grants, so you'll know by November, I think it was November 4th, if you're approved or not. And nothing gets paid out until after February, and then into that next, I don't know, I guess, is there a question of whether there's a deadline by which we need to have spent the money? Is that your question? Because
No, it's more the opposite. Are we in trouble if we spent it too early?
Well, I guess you're just in trouble if you're counting on the money and then you don't get it. Right? Like if you spend it and you want to be reimbursed, well, it is a matter of, let me think this through.
Yeah. So let me jump in here, Sandy, for a second.
Okay.
I have been chatting with Sandy about setting up the grant, just because I've done this a couple of these before. And so that is not, Victor, your specific question is this. How far back from the approval can you go with a purchase? Is it Victor's purchase next week for a heat pump? Is it last year? Or is your purchase after the approval date? And Victor, I'm going to speak for Sandy here, and we don't have that answer just yet, and that's an important one to have a conversation. And that's not something to my fault that I brought up to Sandy when she came to me. But Victor, to be clear for everyone else, at what point can you start purchasing things that could be applied? And for some grants, it's like after you get the application. Some can be before, maybe 1 month before, or expression of interest, or because we don't want, what you purchased last year to come forward and get that covered. We want to see moving forward. So difficult question, Victor. It's an important question, Victor. And I'll have a conversation with Sandy, and we'll hopefully get an answer and post it on the Sandy will post it on the website.
Yeah, I can. Does that sound like the right question, Victor?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Good. Thanks for clearing the mud out there, Stephen.
Yeah, no, Victor, if you're asking it, others are wondering the same thing.
Oh,
So
that's a good question.
totally appreciate you bringing that up. Yep. Vern, my friend, I see you. You're on mute, my friend.
Okay, so my question is, if this grant up to like 50% up to 6,000, is that for a given, like a specific project, like a heat pump, or is that like there could be smaller projects that, can you combine projects and with the, or does it have to be, like, is it customizable per building? Like if you have needs in one area, or
Yeah, your application form asks what you're going to do. And
Okay.
then you write what you want to do and how much it's going to cost. And that is your application.
okay, and if you're in a building with we're in a building with 2 congregations, so is that a grant per congregation or per building?
Well, that's another good question.
Yeah.
I will have to consult the team
Okay.
about that. That's
Like we're actually both represented on this call, so.
oh, cool. Way to go. Congregational.
We're the poor cousins. They are the rich ones.
Right.
Okay.
All right.
I'll write that question down.
That's great. Eric, I see your hand, and then George. Now, before I'm gonna do either of you, I'm gonna take a screenshot.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I want to just capture this. I want to capture all these amazing faces because if people sort of drift off, and that's okay. All right. So hang on, I need to show myself so I can get there we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to count to 3. I'm going to take a picture. So if you want to smile, wave your hand, make a goofy face, whatever you want to do, that's great. So 1, 2, 3. There we go, everybody. Thank you. I appreciate that. Eric, then George, and then I got Eugene in the question.
Yeah, hi, Stephen. My name is Eric Friesen. I'm with the Foothills Mennonite Congregation in Calgary. Just by way of reference, so that you don't feel like I might be asking something that's a little too technical. I've been in the commercial construction real estate development business for over 30 years.
Oh, that's nerd, man. Give it to me.
I've worked for, large corporations, built lots of buildings. I want to go back in your pyramid there, because there was something that I felt was missed. There's no mention of roofs or roof assemblies.
Yeah.
And the largest amount of heat loss in any structure is right at the parapet. And I built a number of large warehouses and stuff like that, and we actually had to pull the roof assemblies apart because those connections weren't done properly. So I think you need to focus on that in your pyramid there.
Yeah. So to answer that question, the pyramid is a residential based one. It just happens to be an easy guide.
It still applies in residential buildings.
Well, there's not too many flat roofs in residential buildings, but
Multi-residential, no.
Yeah, I would say the same. Out of the number of congregations here, I'd say 90+% are probably all pitched roofs except for the 1950s, 1960s additions.
Yeah, because our church has a flat roof.
Yeah, right. Totally cool. And when I go in detail, right, when I'm talking to a congregation a little more, I do ask the age of the roof assembly, because that is the opportunity, to your point, Eric. That's, replacing the roof, more insulation. Totally agree, my friend. Totally.
And those kind of things need to be looked at before you look at solar, before you look at any other type of thing like that. The other point that I kind of like to make is that I would think that the majority of the facilities in Mennonite Church Canada overall are probably 20 years old and older. And because of the nature of the organizations that use those facilities, the churches, who are usually struggling to meet financial obligations, there's probably a lot of deferred maintenance. And when you go into an energy audit and you start looking at things, you're going to have to go deeper. You're going to have to go into building condition assessment. You're going to have to go into, like assessing mechanical systems, electrical services, assessing conditions of the roofs, of the walls. And like you said, with windows, your energy loss is at that connection between the window and the wall assembly, not necessarily the window itself. Yes. So I'd like to caution people, especially in older buildings, that as soon as you get into some of these things, even if you're in a 20-year-old building, you may find things that are going to end up being capital intensive because there's a lot of maintenance that hasn't been done over time. Yeah. I've restored a lot of buildings. I've renovated tons of buildings, and there's always stuff that you can't account for.
Totally agree, Eric. That's awesome. So you're in Calgary people, Edmonton people. Eric's volunteering to help you.
I can. I may not just volunteer, but that's my.
I'm just bugging, my friend. I'm just bugging. And Eric, I'm delighted to have another building nerd on here with me, and I super appreciate your insight. Honestly, like I really, really do. I'm zipping. Eric and I are going to nerd here for a second. I'm zipping through this, man. But from a building science perspective, 100% agree. I'm just trying to hit the top, the highlights to get people thinking. But open up a can of worms. The average age of a faith community building is 82 years.
That's right. I think it's important that everybody on this call understands that this is great stuff, yeah, we can do a lot of low hanging fruit, but in the process of doing that, there are risks.
Yep. Awesome. Thanks, Eric. George, my friend, you're next. You're on mute, George. George, you're on mute.
Thanks. Our congregation, Steinbeck Mennonite, is looking at moving into a smaller building, which has been gutted and provides an opportunity for a major refit. Just wondering, would the Mennonite Church Canada grant apply to the design, the design of a major renovation? It's actually it's almost like a new build.
That's a very good question, and I don't know the answer to that either, but I will ask the committee. That I don't even think I could shoot from the hip on that. Yeah, that's a good question, George. I'll write that down. Thank you.
We can
Yeah,
talk
these
to
are great questions, because Sandy has a committee of
Yeah.
amazing people that are put this plan together, and
Yeah.
we're working out the details. And so these are great questions to let's fine tune so that you know these answers before the deadline. So that's great, George. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Eugene, you've got a question. LED retrofit member approved for use. Ballast and bulb replacements, you've only proved they're not available in box stores. You're converting your lamps to LEDs. Yeah, cost of materials less than the price of the ballast, and labor is also yeah.
Also
So
less.
you're talking, Eugene, you're talking about the 4-foot tubes here?
Yes, the 4 foot by 4 lamp.
Yeah.
I've been in building maintenance too for years, and I have been the first to shoot down light replacement in the last 20 years, especially in church buildings, because they're not used that much.
Mhm.
We had audits done and there was no payback on it in any short term, but this is a game changer. These lamps were first introduced in the US, and they weren't allowed in Ontario until I was finally able to pick some up about 4 months ago from my electrical wholesaler. And it just, you pull the old ballast out, wire one end to direct 110, put a safety label on it, and you're good to go. And the reduction in energy cost just on the ballast alone is phenomenal.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool, Eugene. Yeah, and the technology, especially for lighting, is LEDs is changing rapidly. 5 years ago, you couldn't put an LED bulb without mucking with the ballast, and now you can put an LED bulb, and now you can do these other things and make even more energy savings, right? Like it's super exponential. And so it's a huge opportunity, like Eugene says. I totally agree. It's worth looking into now. The energy savings is on the table. Yeah. That's awesome, Eugene. I really appreciate that. Well, Ron, I see you.
I'll get the right buttons yet. There we go.
There you go.
Ron Weep from Springsteen Mennonite in Manitoba. And I've gone through the last council meeting, our church council meeting, and I got approval from them to start working on an audit. But the audit that they're interested in is the virtual audit. And what I'm wondering is, can you tell me what the steps are to go through that? I understand it has something to do with walking around with a video camera and taking pictures and speaking to somebody live. Is that the process, or how does this thing work?
Yeah, so you would just reach out to me, and we'll share the slide deck so you have all contact information. Then we would just organize that. And so we do have to still get the clarification of when things can start as far as the clock. But yeah, then we just set up a time, and someone on an iPad or a phone walking around your church with strong Wi-Fi, and me at this end trying not to throw up. That's really how it works. You think I'm kidding?
Well, I know that a lot of these older buildings, and ours included, are sometimes quite messy. And some of the construction has really fallen behind, or repair work has fallen behind. And I would be embarrassed to show you a lot of the corners of our building, but I think I would get my guts together and do it for you,
Yeah.
because I think that's what's needed.
Yeah, and so Ron, like, one of the reasons like I'm here helping is because I've literally worked with a few thousand faith community buildings coast to coast over the years, like a lot. I've been in them, I've worked remotely with them. So you know, the fact that you've still got the Christmas decorations from 1958 in a garbage bag because Edna hasn't passed away and we can't throw them out until Edna passes away. I know how that works. This isn't my first rodeo. Like, that's okay. You're not going to surprise me.
So it's a direct call to you to set it up, and then away we go,
Yeah.
or we set a time where it works.
Yeah, I'll just figure out something like that. And again, I'm not pressuring. I want to be clear. I'm here to offer insights and to help launch a really, really amazing program. And I'm not here to sell stuff. I want to be really clear.
Okay.
So, Jerry,
you.
I see you. Oh, Sandy, did you want to jump in there or anything? Okay, just checking. Jerry.
Hi, we have a building in Langley, British Columbia that's 25 years old.
Okay.
We have rooftop HVAC units on the top.
Yep.
And you probably know that the lifetime of rooftop HVAC units is about 25 years.
Yes, sir.
So they're currently powered by natural gas.
Yep.
So I have one question. I was following up on George's question. Does the grant, would that apply to even something like a feasibility study? And so that's another question for you, Sandy. I'm sure you need to go back to your committee on that. But Stephen, any words of wisdom in regards to how we move ahead into looking at options for replacing our natural gas HVAC units?
Yeah. So this is great that you asked that specific question, Jerry, because I'm gonna circle around and connect Eric's piece. The second question is the age of your roof is probably 25 years, Jerry. Would that be accurate?
That's correct, but we've replaced our roof already and we put more insulation under.
All right. So as long as
we replaced it about 10 years ago.
Right. So whenever you pull a mechanical thing off a roof, you make a hole. And so if we're at the lifespan of the roofing system, we want to make sure that we're not all of a sudden behind the eight ball cost-wise with a new roof at the same time. So
Yep.
I think the question typically at this point for many congregations is like, do I put another gas appliance in or do I look at heat pumps? Now heat pumps are way more efficient operationally. Heat pumps also provide air conditioning as well. So if your rooftop unit's only providing heat, the question is, do you need air conditioning? And you may or may not. That's not a, I don't answer that question. But if so, do you need it through the whole building or just in the offices and rental spaces, not in the sanctuary? Do we start looking at zones? So if we're going just with a gas, because financially that's what we can afford, then I recommend Energy Star, right? Get the best bang for your buck from a new gas appliance with an Energy Star. If we're going with a heat pump, we want to make sure it's properly sized. Mechanical calculations, heat and cooling load calculations are done properly, so we get a properly sized delivery system. I always recommend people over products. So, meaning brands. I will take a contractor who's on time, who's helpful, who's educational, who returns phone calls. I will take them over someone who's got the sparkliest, shiniest bells and whistles product. Because in the end of the day, we're all volunteers. And I want someone where I can call and I'm going to get an answer. Right. And that's really important when we're talking about the church's money, not ours. Right. So always recommend, if you have good find a contractors that you feel comfortable with and help you out. for sure. No.
Can I ask a follow-up question, Steve? So when you're talking a heat pump, you're talking air to air?
Correct. Yeah, air source heat pumps, which would do more than enough in your climate. I have heat pumps in North Rock, Newfoundland, like northern Spits, putting heat pumps in, and there ain't nothing in Langley you can throw at it. It's going to be anywhere close to that. So, yep. Well,
Thank you.
cool.
Thanks, Jerry. We have a question in the chat, a quick one from Noreen. Are there savings in the plug and play LED light bulbs compared to complete replacement of the old lights with new LED light fixtures? You got an answer on that one?
Yeah, so Eugene, plug and play, you're going from a 40 watt to a 14 watt, but you are still using the existing ballast. So
No. No, we're not using the ballast.
No,
When-
you're not. You're not. I'm agreeing. I'm saying
Yeah,
if you're just
okay.
taking a 4 foot and going to Home Hardware and buying a 4 foot LED and plugging it in, the existing ballast. So you will see savings from the light bulb, but with the ballast in place, by going to a new fixture, which gets rid of that whole ballast, you will see a bigger energy savings. You are correct.
And in our case, when we have bulbs burn out, the cost of the LED bulb is on par with the cost of a new fluorescent bulb. At that point, we cut the ballast out, convert it to 110, put an identification label on the inside. So we haven't changed fixtures, and I can do a 4 lamp change out in less than 20 minutes.
Does that answer your question, Noreen?
Yeah. Everyone figure out where Eugene is and get him to come by and pop by. That's awesome. I love the skills here. I love it.
And actually, on that note, I would seriously say that if anyone wants to offer any advising or any help, look around, like you can check in with me. I have everyone's email address. If you want to reach somebody, we can connect people to each other, because that is the church.
Yeah, for sure.
Christy's up.
Christy.
Hi, I'm from Bolzeder. We're just outside Winnipeg. I'm wondering if you're looking, Sandy, if your committee or your whatever has an option to kind of build a bit of a database, like the feasibility study, like as a resource sharing, right? Because we are a tiny community and we're trying to, figure out where we even start, and not everybody has to make the same conversations to Hydro and try and track down answers, right? And so if there's a way even to information share about what works in different regions with different, even different hydro companies I don't know. Because for example, like we're not convinced that a heat pump is the best bang for our buck in our climate, right? But maybe we're wrong. Yeah, more just as a going forward basis, right? As we build the information to share and update as there's more and more available.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question, Christy. Thanks. It might be a simple, well, I don't know if it'd be simple, but having some sort of forum or somewhere where people share what they've learned. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Maybe like even final reports, like lessons learned, like as a to get the money. Here's our final report of what we did. Here's some photos, a bit of our story. And Christy, to your comment on heat pumps. Yeah, Manitoba, tough sell for heat pumps. I'm not gonna tell you air source heat pumps. Ground source, yeah, but then huge initial cost up front. But the technology is coming. The dual stage is getting better. So I have a dual stage. I'm in Ontario. I'm not in Manitoba, but I have a dual stage. And so I can squeeze out a lot of energy, but we want to shelter that heat pump on the outside for anyone in cold climate looking at heat pumps. Yeah, for sure. And Purpose Construction out of Winnipeg. If anyone in the PEG has heard of Purpose Construction, give them a call. Talk to Kaylin. Kaylin's a resource person and knows a lot of what's going on. They're a regional resource person for me for the United Church of Canada program, but Kaylin and their team work with all faith communities. as well. So Purpose Construction, super cool organization, super cool. And they do inexpensive energy audits and weatherization programs. They've done a bunch of churches. Yeah, some good people there. Noreen, I see you.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for your presentation tonight. My question is, we have, the building's approximately 55 years old. It was built as two buildings kind of together, so there's a lot of redundancy. I have two boilers. I have two rooftop units, a heat pump and a furnace. And anyway, my question is the original air conditioner is closer to 50 years old. Not the 25, 30. It's been rebuilt a few times. It's functional. But you were talking to somebody else earlier about looking at zones. Can you do a quick 10-second layman term? What would be my options if I don't want to go to spending $10,000 to $15,000, $20,000 on a rooftop unit? What would be my options? Gas powered. I'm in Ontario.
Yeah, okay. So understanding what mechanical systems work what areas, right?
Okay.
So one could be just a sanctuary.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, and one could be the gym, and one could be the basement, and one could be the office addition,
Okay.
or whatever the case may be. And so just by understanding, so those are zones. So I
Okay.
got a mechanical system delivering to here, and that's a zone. Or I have one radiator loop that does that zone, and that's
Yeah.
different than this zone.
Yep.
So when we understand each of those, do you need air conditioning in the sanctuary? Yeah, doubtful in London.
Oh, we do.
Yeah, we can, and we can benefit
Yeah.
from it. But do we want to make sure that the office is, so the
Yeah.
minister or the administrator don't leave, so that they have air conditioning? Right. Honest to goodness, I've worked with churches where that was their requirement, air conditioning, so they don't lose their administrator.
Yeah.
So if that's the zone, spend the money on that zone, right? And get the most efficient thing, and don't worry about the other ones. Now, with the time, so if that air conditioner is doing all the building or a zone, that's what you want to figure out. And is that meeting the needs, the current and future needs of heating and cooling for your operation?
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I hope I answered that question. Did I? If I didn't, ask.
No, you did in a way. And I understand the zones, and I know what zone that this particular unit runs. And yeah, it's a necessity. It would have to be replaced at some point.
Okay, and so it is the air conditioner. It is needed. It's in a zone. We know what it does.
Yeah.
You can go with an Energy Star air conditioner, which is sort of just replacing with new. And if it's a
Okay.
rooftop unit, back to Eric, and just making sure your roof's in good nick, because if you're pulling something off and we do damage to the roof, that's a
Yeah.
major issue.
Actually,
Secondly,
that's a really great point, because we just replaced our unit on our roof on our pitched part of the church. And where this particular rooftop unit's on a very, very small roof comparatively to the rest of the church. And it's a flat roof. So we didn't have it replaced because we knew that the rooftop unit at some point would need to be replaced. And we'll do the roof section at that time.
okay, and so to Eric's point, we want to add as much insulation as we can afford. And literally, if it's cooling underneath, passive strategies such as insulation always have better payback than mechanical strategies right? It's easier to put insulation in there because it keeps it cool versus keeping, lack of insulation.
Yeah, I think we might have missed the mark on the insulation part, but it always comes down to cost, right? So.
Yeah, totally. So if that roof is now on the table as far as the financial conversation, that can of course dictate how much you have for the rooftop unit as well, right? And so, yeah, we're gonna have to do that. So now let's see how we can find, where's that sweet spot? How much insulation versus mechanicals?
Unfortunately, with a building that's at 50, 55, you start to see, and there's tons of capital projects.
Well,
Thank you for your time.
No worries. Cool.
There's a question in the chat here from iPhone 3 about, it says we're located in Vancouver, BC. We'd like to change our kitchen stoves from gas to electric. Would that be something possible and not too expensive to do?
So sorry, that must have been to you. 'cause I
It's
don't
in
see
the
it, so-
chat. Oh, it is directly to me, yes. And I'm
no,
not
that's
sure who
okay.
iPhone 3 is, but you can say more about that if you like. They're just asking if it'd be too expensive or possible to change from gas to electric for the kitchen stoves.
Too expensive. The challenge is your electrical panel capacity. And so that's usually can be a limiting factor. If we have an older building, you may have an old panel and maybe like, 80 amp panel, 100 amp panel, and you may not be able to take the new load because you're gonna have to run wires from the kitchen to the panel. So that's a question. And then and that can impact your capacity to do that. It becomes a cost. Other than that, safety, switching out of the gas. Now we're, not having pilot lights running, carbon monoxide poisoning, should have ventilation hoods with fire suppression systems, like all those stupid stuff that just gets really expensive and dangerous to use for volunteers, especially people who may not have never used such a beast. So switching to electric can be better, and it is coming. We're seeing regulations, new construction regulations about gas stoves. So it is coming.
Can I make a quick comment?
Yeah, Eric, please jump in, man.
I'm also working in the green energy field, and we're working with a client down in Coaldale. Anytime you're going to change out your switch gear, or you have to bring in a new service or upgrade your service and change your transformer size, you can be looking at anywhere between 14 to 60-week delivery times on things. So it's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, if you need a new service drop, yeah, for sure.
Yep.
Totally. Yep, appreciate it. Not always the case, but definitely can be the case. So again, always, and that's why I love the building nerd with me here. Like, and I love it, man. I love it. I love having it. So that's great. Good.
There's another question here in the chat. Oh, it's not a question. Eugene wrote, we are renovating the 70-plus-year-old Mannheim building over a period of 6 years. Oh, he will upload the information so we can see it. That's great, Eugene.
Cool.
So I can share that address when that comes out. Maybe Eugene, you can email me and let me know when there's something there to see. That's great.
Great. Well, I super appreciate everyone taking the time to come out. And I hope it's been helpful. And when Sandy first came to me with the Mennonite Church Canada doing this, I'm just happy to support it, because I really do strongly feel it's a great opportunity, and serious leadership from Sandy and her team, the Mennonite Church Canada, but everyone here as well. So just really acknowledging that. So I'm grateful.
Yeah, I think we've gotten all the questions. I don't see any more hands. Oh, there's one more thing in the chat, but maybe it's, oh yeah, the question about yes, I'm going to get to that in 1 second. So any other questions? I guess we'll just say the questions have been asked. If you have further questions about the stuff Stephen has talked about, you can contact him. Stephen, do you want to I put your email address in the chat, but maybe I don't know if you want to add your phone number in there.
That's the easiest way to get a hold of me is through the email. So it's perfect.
Okay, yeah. So use email to reach Stephen with more specific questions, or, like we said, there's people in every region here with expertise in this area. So talk to people close to you who know what's going on around where you are. Yes, I wanted to just go back to the grant application. So I'm not going to go through it in great detail, because I feel like the form on the website is actually pretty clear. But basically, if you go to the website, and I think Stephen put that in the chat earlier, there are details about the money, the financial details, who is eligible, how the funds can be used. That's all there, just little drop down menus. And the timeline for the grant application is also there too. And if I try to say it now, well, I can say some, but September 30th is the date you want to keep in mind. After that, we won't take any more applications. If you have an application in sooner, we'll be really happy. That gives us more time to look at it and think it through. So sometime before September 30th, get in your grant or your application. And then you'll know by November 4th if you have been successful. And then the earliest date we'll be paying out money is middle of February. And the funds are to be distributed as a reimbursement after receipts have been submitted. So you'll find out you're approved, you do your project, you give us the receipts and we'll pay back or we'll reimburse up to our commitment. If your church can't afford to do the paying in advance, you should let us know that when you apply so that we can take that into consideration. We don't want that to be make or break, but we need to know. In terms of how to apply, the application process, it's a set of 6 steps. Completing the Greener Congregation score sheet, doing this workshop, so glad that so many of you are here. Doing some kind of audit to discuss your building or something similar to it. If you have a person in your community who can just walk you through this and help you make your decisions, you can use those people as well. We just want to make sure that people are consulting with people the experts around them. So steps 3 and 4 are around audits. And step 5 is to connect with someone in your region, with the working group in your region that works with climate or creation care. And if you don't know who that is, you can find links on the application form, or you can contact me and I will put you directly in touch with those people. And then step 6 is just to submit the application form between June 1 and September 30th. So the clock is ticking. I think if you have further questions about the way that process works, just get in touch with me. I'd be super happy to chat with any of you about that. Once you had a look at the website to see what it looks like. I also wanted to say there are a few people in this meeting who are part of the sustainability leadership group. And so I'm going to switch off. We have to unpin. I don't know how to unpin you right now, but if you're part of that committee, wave your hand and then say something. If you're part of the sustainability leadership group, just want to catch those people. I know you're there.
Yep, now we got Ian and Joanne and Nelson waving.
If you say something, your face will show up on the recording here. So say something.
Hello.
That's Joanne Moyer, part of Sustainability Leadership Group. Thanks, Joanne. Next.
Hi, BC Representative Ian Funk out of Langley.
Ian, perfect. And Ian is also part of the Creation Care Task Group in Mennonite Church, BC. Who else do we have here? Is Tim still on? And then we also
Tim was on before, but I don't see his screen anymore.
I think he's gone. Tim Weave-Neufeld is the chair of the Sustainability Leadership Group. And we also have Mark Bigland-Pritchard. Mark, do you want to wave? You're the Mennonite Church Saskatchewan. Actually, say something. Yeah.
Yeah, something.
There's Mark. Mark is the chair of the Climate Emergency Response Team of Mennonite Church Saskatchewan. Thank you so much for being here. Anyone else who's in one of these groups, a regional working group that I've missed? I'm having trouble seeing all the names and faces at once.
It would be good to recognize Alan Hebert, who's a big part of this grant and building that.
Alan Hebert, can you say hello?
Yeah, I can say hello.
Thank you, Alan.
Yeah, now there's a bunch of us here from Foothill, so we're actively looking at some of this stuff and applying it. So it might take a while though to get our act in gear.
Alan's name is all over the documents that I've been working with to put this grant together. So big thanks to Alan and the Sustainability Leadership Group for all the work done. Yeah, all the groundwork. So thank you so much. All right, I'm sure there's more people I should point out, but I think in the interest of time, we'll roll through. Jerry, you have your hand up. Did you have a question?
Sandy, is this grant, would this be a one-time occurrence only? I'm looking at thinking that the work that we might have to do will take longer than the summer will allow us. So I'm just curious about whether this is something that would be another grant might be available in future years, or how would that be structured?
Yeah, great question, Jerry. The hope is that we will do this for as long as there's money in the Creation Care Fund. So you can donate, your church can donate to the Creation Care Fund. Some people are thinking about it as an offset. So if your regional church has decided to keep track of, for example, travel expenses, and they want to do offsetting, they can put it in the Creation Care Fund. Any individual can put money in there. Joanne Moyer has a great idea about how money can get in there. Can I put you on the spot, Joanne?
Sure. Yeah, so this wasn't my idea, actually. I stole it and adapted it from somewhere else. But as someone who doesn't really need my carbon tax rebates, I am going to put them into this fund. So there you go.
Easy peasy. Thanks, Joanne. Yeah, so we're hoping that we'll be able to do this a bunch of years running. And so, yeah, if you want to know more about the Creation Care Fund, that's also on the Climate Action webpage of Mennonite Church Canada. And you can contact me with questions. Thanks for asking that. Okay, what else do I need to say? I think that's basically it. Questions, please ask. Stephen, thank you so much for bringing your expertise and your passion for buildings and for the church. And obviously you understand the church. So we're glad to have you as one of our many resources. And yeah, so thanks so much for helping us out. And to everybody else, thank you so much for coming and being part of this. Let's keep the conversation going in any way that we can. Anything I've missed? Anything that really needs to be said that somebody will not sleep if it doesn't get said here? Doesn't look like it. All right. Thank you so much for coming. I kind of feel like we need a benediction because this is God's work. So let's pray and then let's go enjoy the rest of our evening. Creator God, this is a time, it's a pivotal time, it's an important time, and we, the church, have a chance to be instruments of your peace. We have a chance to be your hands and feet in more ways than we already are. And so we just thank you for these chances, for this opportunity, and for the wind of the Spirit among us. We thank you for the brains and the hands and the feet and the nails and all the stuff that's part of this kind of work. Help us to remember that all of these steps are part of the way the church responds faithfully to who you've called us to be in this time. Thank you for your goodness. Thank you for your love. Thank you for your mercy. And thank you for the strength that we have together as one, as the body of Christ. In your name we pray a blessing on all of this. Amen.